creating an environment where we make it look like, you know, it's easy for me, it should be easy for you, is not fair, it's not honest. And yeah, I mean, I think you need a good support system around you.
Hi Louise, so good to see you.
How are you?
What do you think are the most important topics that we want to talk about in a safe space?
Wow. Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I think really it's the inevitable juggling of a career, a high-powered, intense career in arbitration with having a family for most women. Now, not every woman will necessarily want to have a family, but I think at some point you will have caring responsibilities, whether that's for parents or for other relatives. And I think just learning how to manage that and achieve sort of career success whilst not neglecting your personal life.
Why is that something that we need to discuss in a safe space? Why is it possible to discuss this openly? And why is it a typical women issue?
Well, another good question. I think it isn't necessarily something that we should have to discuss in a safe space. It should be out in the open, and I'm happy to say it is much more so now than it was 15 years ago. But I think the reality is that when people are pushing, for example, for counsel or partner in a big law firm, they don't necessarily also want to be saying, well, what happens if I want to have a baby and I need to take a year off? Or if you're a male associate, you know, I want to take a step back for a couple of years while I have young children. How am I going to do that? There was certainly, and probably still is, a perception that that would potentially hold you back career-wise and wasn't really compatible with pushing for counsel or partnership.
Isn't it easier to factor in the career progress of the women on the team if they are able to openly share their family plans? If you can have 3 senior associates that all go towards partnership, and you can sort of, I know you can only plan so much, but you could have a conversation at least about who is going to be away at what point so that the team can grow together?
Definitely, and that's something that I think we're seeing more and more, and certainly I'm now in a team where we're 2, so the arbitration team here, we're 2 women partners in a group of 5 partners, and so things are much more open and easy to discuss. And I think we are also seeing more and more with the younger generations that it's not just women who want family time, it's men as well. And I think the more people are open about that once they are in positions of seniority, the easier it is for the younger generations to talk about it, and without fear of sort of being seen as an outsider or being controversial.
Well, you said family time.
Yes.
How about self-time? How important is it to find time for yourself without work or family in order to find a sustainable, productive way to actually do your work and do the best that you can do at your work?
I think it's really important. I mean, it's part of the sort of well-being and mental health discussion that's thankfully being had much more openly these days. I think it's really important that people step away and you know, even if that's for 1 or 2 days at the weekend, and only those 2 days, to be able to not be online and checking emails all the time for a chunk of time is really important. I have to admit I'm not very good at doing it, and I have tried to discipline myself a little bit more at stepping away and disconnecting, but it's really hard.
When we talk about mental health, where does neurodiversity fit in? And I think it possibly links to the question of how we adapt the work environment to parental responsibilities or caring responsibilities. Can we adapt it also to the neurodiversity so that people who need less stimulus or who need to work at night or during the day, who need to take time off to exercise, how do we give everyone the unique workspace that they need in order to do their best?
I think we need to be having conversations, and you know, if we don't ask questions, we're not going to know, and we need to foster an environment where people are comfortable talking about their diversity. One of the things we've been doing here on a sort of unofficial, casual basis, but amongst the team, is trying to talk to our other team members about how we like to work. So I like to know, for example, you know, when something's going to be delivered. I'm a little bit of a sort of list maker, and I like to organize things, and so I work best. It's probably sort of tending towards OCD a little bit, but I work best if I know, you know, who's in charge of what, is it being dealt with, when am I going to see a draft, and you know, then I can step away and trust that the process is. So I always talk to my team and I say that's, you know, that's how I like to work. So with me, you'll do really well and you'll help me if you keep me updated. You know, don't feel like you're bothering me with an email just to tell me when you'll get me something. I actually really appreciate that. And so then I ask others, what works for you? Do you like to work early in the morning? Do you work better late at night? Do you like to be updated, or would you rather I left you alone and just gave you a draft in a few days? That sort of thing. So trying to be more frank, I think, with where everyone's coming from.
That sounds wonderful. In terms of being more frank, when we go through the process as arbitration counsel or as arbitrator, it is a stressful, demanding process, and I think you can't get old enough to not experience stress at some point. How much of that stress do you share with your team? On the one hand, you don't want to have them question your capability to withstand the stress and to perform nonetheless or because of it. But on the other hand, does it help if they know we're not infallible and that we actually do experience stress and that we do cry in our offices if it really hits us, just so they know it's normal to feel that way?
I think so. I mean, I think it's a difficult role to play because you have to be sort of strong and lead the team, and you have to carry everybody else's stress and nerves with you, and ultimately portray a confidence that they can then latch onto. But at the same time, you're right that there is something to be said for being honest about what you're feeling inside, and you know, we're not going to help younger practitioners if we lead them to believe that it's all easy and we're just, you know, waltzing in and having a great time. You know, we worry, we stress, we get the imposter syndrome, everybody does, and you need to be honest about that. So the way I deal with it is, I think in the moment, I don't show the stress. So if we have a big hearing and I'm the partner on the case and I'm doing the advocacy, I have to internalize that stress, or I have to let it out, you know, with my family or something, maybe in the gym. But after the event, once we've come through the other side, I will talk openly about, you know, how difficult that was, and I will ask the team for feedback on, you know, how they thought I might improve next time. Was there anything I did that I could have done better?
What have they said?
That's a really good question. I think maybe probably the most useful comment I've had was that in the moment, so when we're all rushed off our feet, sometimes I would do better to take more time to sort of break instructions down. So very often we're sort of trying to, things come across our desk, it's like, quickly, who can deal with this? And I think as managers and as partners, we have to remember that, you know, of course there's value in getting the job done, and giving it to someone else, but you have to also take the time with them to make sure that they really sort of understand the exercise.
That makes sense. That's fair.
I mean, it's pretty basic stuff, but I think it goes out the window sometimes when we're all rushing.
And it's difficult to know how much you need to explain to what associate, I suppose.
Exactly, because I think the older we get, the more forgetful we are, but also the further we are from what it was like to be a trainee or a junior associate. We forget how much we've learned in the decade or so that's passed since then, and it is difficult to put yourself back in those shoes. And I mean, I'm so impressed by trainees and associates these days. I don't think I was half the trainee that some of our trainees are, frankly speaking.
How much of the training and education can you delegate to those that work directly for you? I suppose you can't make time for every trainee.
No, and I think we have a great structure where senior associates and counsel are involved in the training of more junior associates, and the junior associates are involved in training the trainees. And I think you have to do that, partly for the time reason, but also because, you know, I don't know the latest tech tools. You might, but you know, I have associates who are teaching me stuff about, you know, how we could be more efficient with our document management, or what was the other one the other day? Software that takes audio recordings of Zoom calls and produces minutes for you. So, you know, you don't need to sit there and obviously you need a human to check the content, but just ways in which time can be saved that, you know, I wouldn't be able to teach someone.
No, the next generation, they're beating us at some things.
Totally.
I also think it's helpful for them to training. I don't think that's necessarily a skill that we have, that we receive in law school, and we're not all born managers, so I think it is helpful to start that process early and also work as a team, teach each other and teach us what they know.
Yeah, I think that's true.
There, but really uninspiring. Oh, okay.
Louise, we talked a little bit about your parental mentorship program, and you are not hiding your kids. You're one who's proud to say that you have kids and that you have managed to be a mother and a successful lawyer at the same time. What does it take to combine those two?
Well, to coin a well-known phrase, it takes a village. I mean, I have a very supportive partner at home who has put his career kind of second. But I think there's no two ways about it. It's really hard. And you know, everyone says to me it gets easier. As they get older, they want you less, they need you less, it gets easier. And I have no doubt they'll be buried in iPads or something soon. But for the time being, it's hard. It's really hard. And I think we have to be honest about that, because creating an environment where we make it look like, you know, it's easy for me, it should be easy for you, is not fair, it's not honest. And yeah, I mean, I think you need a good support system around you, whether that's paid or that's family. You need someone that can be there when there's a crisis. You know, a kid is sick or you have to travel for a hearing or something. And then you just basically, I'm sorry to say, need to put yourself second. So when you do have downtime or you've been traveling for weeks on end, the kids need to see you. So that has to be your first priority. And you know, your manicure or your gym session waits, basically. It's the only way to do it. I've also become better at snatching moments for myself if I can in like weekday evenings. So when I know they're going to bed anyway, I might go and get a manicure quite late or go have a massage at 9 p.m., something like that. Keeps me sane.
How old are your kids now?
They are 3 and 8. Yeah.
And what are the names?
So my 8-year-old is Grace. She's super stubborn and probably going to be a lawyer, which I keep trying to discourage her from that because she's got an answer for everything. And I'm like, you don't know how much hard work it's going to be. But and my son Max is 3 and he's cheeky as anything. He's trouble.
Wow.
Yeah.
How much time do you spend with them? Do you see them during the week? Is that depending on your schedule? When do they expect to see you or hope to see you?
I mean, they hope to see me all the time, particularly my son. It's very strange. My daughter's very independent, and even at his age, she was very independent. My son is much more needy. I don't know if it's a mother-son thing, but I think COVID's been really great for changing the sort of day-to-day. So pre-COVID, I would probably only see them first thing in the morning before I left for the office, and then I wouldn't see them in the evenings because they would be in bed by the time I got home because they're young. And so I would only see them at weekends. And then of course, if you're traveling for hearings or you're in, you know, court or witness meetings, you know, you might miss them completely during the week. Now I try and work from home at least 2 days a week, and every morning I drop one of them. So even when I'm coming into the office, I drop one of them at school or at nursery on the way in. And so I don't get here till maybe 9:30, maybe 9:45, but it's just worth it to have that time with them.
How much do you consider whether that will impact the time you have for them when you accept a position like the president of ArbitralWomen or an appointment as arbitrator? Does that come to your mind?
The honest answer is no. I'm selfish in that respect, I suppose. I'm a doer and I love challenges and opportunities, so I will take them all and figure it out. And that's just, and you know, sometimes you're juggling so much, you think, what have I done? Why have I taken this on? But somehow, with help from particularly my husband, who who, as I said, has kind of taken a back seat career-wise to enable me. It just works.
I think one part, I don't have children myself, but I think one part of it is finding the time to allocate to raising your children. The other part that I feel is just with women forever is the whole process of having children, and then getting your figure back and breastfeeding, and the fact that you cannot hide it from anyone, whereas men have a much easier job, I think, just not disclosing that they have family or disclosing when they feel ready. How much do you feel like is that something that requires more open conversation? Should there be breastfeeding conversations? Should there be, I don't know, kindergartens or nurseries at law firms?
I think absolutely it needs to be an open conversation, and I think it is more and more. I mean, our offices tend to have lactation rooms, for example. We have a service where we will ship breast milk, so if you're breastfeeding and traveling with work, we will ship breast milk anywhere around the world. So
anyone's breast milk?
Anyone who works for the firm
gets breast milk?
So if you're traveling on business whilst breastfeeding, you can ship. So if you express milk, you pump milk, you can ship it back.
You can ship your own milk to where you will be going.
Where your baby is.
Oh, back to where the baby.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a benefit that the firm provides, for example. And I think increasingly we're seeing discussion in London, certainly around hearing centres providing, for example, lactation rooms for breastfeeding mothers, so that you're not forced to use a disabled toilet, for example. So I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, and it's starting to happen. I do think, obviously, the reality is women are more affected by childbirth than men. There's no escaping that. And I think I struggled quite a lot, even though I was working in a supportive environment. I think I had spent so much of my 20s kind of wanting to be seen as the same as men, and just as capable, just as efficient, just as hard-nosed and tireless. That as soon as I knew I was pregnant, it felt to me almost like a weakness, which it's ridiculous. I mean, but it's a feeling I had, and so it's valid. But I was afraid, not so much that if I told people they would judge me, but just that here was this very personal vulnerability that was going to be obvious to anyone just by looking at me, and that would then become a topic of conversation, perhaps first and foremost, before asking about what I was working on, or that I really struggled with. It felt very strange having something so personal in the professional environment and not being able to control that. So I think that's something, and maybe that's particular to me, but I think that's something that women, obviously have to deal with in a way that expectant dads don't. So I think, it's difficult, and certainly I didn't take as much maternity leave as I could have, because I was keen to get back to work and to my clients. And will I look back one day and think I should have taken more time? Maybe, but it felt right for me in the moment. But having said that, when associates come and they tell me the great news that they're having a baby, I'm like, take as much time as you can, take it all. You should just enjoy it, because I guess now on the other side of it, I know how hard it is being a working parent. So I'm like, the longer you can stay at home and just focus on one thing and not both, just do it. So anyway, and I felt like it hasn't really impacted my career in any negative way. I mean, if anything, it's made me more capable of multitasking and more efficient, but there's no perfect way of doing anything. There are different models that work for different people, and I think if you decide that you want to come back part-time and you want to do a few years where your career is kind of, it's there, but it's not the number one priority, that's fine. You have a whole life to work. And if you think about it, the 12 months of maternity leave that you might take in this country, or the 2 to 5 years when your kids are really young, it's just a blip in a career. It's, and I say blip, I don't mean blip in a negative way, but I just mean it's a moment. It's over in a flash. And okay, so maybe you won't be on partnership track when you had hoped to be, if that's what you're aspiring to, but taking a couple of years as a detour to focus on family, that's not the wrong answer. That may be the best answer for you. It really depends on the person and how you want to go about it. I'm super organized, super ambitious, and I don't sit down. So even when I'm complaining that I'm tired and I'm jet lagged and I have so much to do, and my husband's like, just sit down then. I'm like, no, but the kitchen's a mess and there's a pile of ironing, and I just can't. It's just how I'm wired. So I think, that horses for courses, and you just have to find what works for you and embrace it. And that's the only way you're going to be happy, really.
Since you mentioned you don't sit down, where does your energy come from? How much do you rest? Or how much do you exercise? How do you make sure you don't take out too much and you will be able to keep going the way you are?
It's a miracle. I mean, I don't know. Wine helps. No, I exercise, definitely. Pilates is my thing. I try and do that a few times a week. Obviously it's more difficult when traveling or in a hearing, and sometimes it has to go on the back burner, but I just try and do it whenever I can, and I don't sweat it if it doesn't happen for a few days. Aside from that, I think I'm just incredibly lucky. I don't sleep particularly well. I never have, so I'm used to being sleep deprived. And I don't know, I seem to be innately quite resilient and quite able to deal with stress, which drives my husband completely mad because he's stressing out about things. He's like, why are you so calm? I'm like, because there's no point in getting stressed. So I think...
How much do you sleep?
I probably 6 to 7 hours a night on a good night. It's not great.
Do you practice non-sleep rest?
No. Okay. No, I am either doing something, well, basically I do something right up until the minute I'm going to bed.
Okay, until the point of exhaustion.
Yeah.
You run until you fall down, then you...
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. Okay. It's not great, is it?
I don't know, do you rest during the day? Do you take time to compose yourself, find your center? Anything esoteric? No.
No. Basically I'm going to have a heart attack when I'm 45, aren't I?
I don't know, I think some people are just like that.
Yeah, I mean, I had my dad was, not to like take away from my mother because she did loads too, but my dad had a very international career that had him traveling here, there and everywhere, and he was, I guess what you'd describe as a workaholic. I mean, he had a mobile phone before anyone knew what a mobile phone was. And I remember we'd be on holiday, he'd take 2 holidays a year, and we'd be on one of those 2 holidays, and he would basically be by the pool with his laptop and his phone. And it's just how I think whatever stamina he's got, he somehow passed on to me.
But isn't part of it that it's not work-life balance, because the work is your life, it is your profession, it is something that you enjoy doing, and of course there are parts that are not as pleasant as others, but generally if you really like your profession, if you like your job, you like doing it, why would you stop on vacation? Why would you not be there and to at least oversee your team and make sure things keep running, because that's your project, that's what you put your energy to, that's what you're trying to create.
I think that's really insightful. I think you have to love this job to do it as much and for as long as some of us do. I think that has to be right. I think where I struggle is when the two worlds collide, so the work and the kids, and say we're on a vacation and, as luck would have it, something blows up on something at work, there's an injunction, there's something that needs immediate attention, but the kids are there. That's the thing I find the hardest, because maybe this is the control freak in me, but it's like I carved out this week for them, and now I have to adapt. And but it happens to all of us, I imagine. And I think what I try and do I'm very conscious that sometimes in those moments I lose my cool with the children, and that I think is the stress coming out in me, and I will snap at them or something, and that's when I think, no, you need to take a step back, you need to breathe, because those are the moments you'll look back on and regret. So I think, that's the crunch point for me, is when you've got work bleeding into family time, or vice versa. Vice versa, not so bad, but when you've carved out some time and then it's just chaos.
You mentioned earlier that you need a support system.
Yes.
For your family in order to continue to be dedicated to work. I found that I have a support system at work that allows me to dedicate time to my family when I have caring responsibilities, not children, but caring responsibilities that come up and that you want to tend to. It is really great to have the support system at work, a team that supports you and can step in for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. One of my partners here at V&E, Roberta Downey, she always says things can go wrong at home as long as they're okay at work, and they can go wrong at work as long as they're okay at home. But if you're dealing with two things, work and home not working, you will not cope. You kind of, something has to give. And I think that's great advice. And I think we're really good here, certainly in my team, at sort of communicating. And so if someone's going through something, if they've suffered a bereavement, for example, and they just need to switch off and they need to go and see to someone else, we talk about it and we cover for one another as best we can. And I think that's kind of the same as having a support network at home.
So I think the key for everything, the key for more diversity, the key for parenthood, the key for work is communication. Communication,
definitely, although my husband will say sometimes I communicate too much. But yeah, I think that's right. I think we have to keep having a dialogue. Whatever that is about, we have to talk, because it's the only way to really understand one another's differences and where we're coming from.
Thank you, Louise. Perfect.